Okay, so now
Won't you stand up?
I'm going to stand over here because I think we're broadcasting more. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to our adult ministry class for the summer. This is the class where we are welcoming Miss Yetta Lowes, and she is the co-founder and CEO of Gestalt Community Schools. Gestalt Community Schools are located in the Hickory Hill area of Memphis, so right down around the center of Mendenhall and Winchester. And there are 5 different schools that operate through the Gestalt Community Schools network. And so we're really glad to have Miss Yetta Lowes here this morning. And I just want to say thank you guys for being present, and we hope you enjoy the presentation today. All right, thank you.
Hi, thank you, Mark, and thank you everyone for extending an invite to me. I love that this can be a little informal. I know I'm in the homes as well as standing in front of you, so I'll be mindful of that. I want to really start out with a question. Of course, my clicker is not working now. It was working just a minute ago. Uh-oh. Let me turn it on, turn it back off. That's always my recommendation. Turn it on, turn it back off, and then it'll work. No. Okay, I may have to walk over and just click it. But that's technology sometimes. But I want to start with a global question to ask you, Mark, if we can go to the next slide. Because I think I've learned a lot in this journey through education about human resiliency. And what are the conditions for resiliency? We're experiencing that throughout the pandemic, and some of the racial unrest that we're having in our country. But what are the conditions of resiliency? And I kind of started to unpack that, not only in my personal life, but in my journey as we opened schools in Memphis, serving, as Mark said earlier, 5 schools, but 2,500 families. So we have this great responsibility to build resiliency and empower our community. And so I want to start a little bit with my journey. If you can't tell, I'm not a Memphian, but I feel like a Memphian. I've been here for 15 years. And when I came here, I was at Sherwood Elementary School as a resident principal. Dr. Johnson, Carol Johnson, was the superintendent at the time. And she invited me to come to be a resident principal, and then the next year to lead a school. And 15 years ago, Memphis really stole my heart, and it's become my home. But I'm originally from the East Coast. My parents are from South Bronx, New York. My mom's side is from the West Indies, Jamaican, Barbados, St. Croix. Those are the islands that my family are from. But we converged in Baltimore. So I grew up in East Baltimore. And that journey, I think, helped me to prepare for my journey here in Memphis. I grew up in East Baltimore in what they call row homes. Some folks call them brownstones. And we lived in a multi-generational home. So I lived on the 3rd floor, my mom, myself, and my brother. My parents were divorced. And so my mom had to move back in with her parents. And it was actually okay because most of these homes were multi-generational homes in the late 60s and early 70s when I grew up. My grandmother was on the 2nd floor. Grandma and grandpa were on the 2nd floor. My uncle, who lived with my grandmother and came home from Vietnam War, had some challenges, so had to move back in. And then the 1st floor was just our living room, dining room, kitchen. And then in the basement area, my grandmother had a basement apartment a neighbor who was hard on their luck moved in with his family. So there was a whole family in that area. And I think about it, I was like, we only had 2 bathrooms in here. But the great thing about this neighborhood, when I would walk home from school and get into some shenanigans, there was always a neighbor that would tell my grandmother what was happening before I could get to the door. You know, she was up at that corner store. And so by the time I got to the doorstep, my grandmother knew everything because I had an ecosystem, or Miss Betsy, my nosy neighbor, who would lean out the window, but she loved us dearly, right? Quintessential nosy neighbor, but now growing up as a grown-up, I so appreciate Miss Betsy, right? But when you're a kid, you're like, oh, she's in the window, you know, you can't get away with anything.
I hope that neighborhood still exists.
It does still exist, and my grandmother's house is still here. They tried to buy it a couple of times, but it's been the family so long.
I was reading about that thing that crashed in Miami, you know, and all the people knew each other, and too bad, because they were such neighbors.
Yeah.
And that's great that you grew up that way.
Yeah, and so many people moved out, unfortunately, with the neighborhood, but it showed me a lot about how a community coming together can make a difference in the individual life. And I grew up going to the neighborhood schools. And one person that was important to me is my 5th grade teacher, Miss Miller. Changed my life, Miss Miller. But I was one of those kids who was in Miss Miller's class. By the way, before this rumor gets out, Miss Miller looks like someone famous. So I had to use this person's picture. Who is this person? Does anyone know who this person is?
Shirley Chisholm.
Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm looked just like Miss Miller. And she was the first Black woman to run for president, right? And, but Miss Miller had these cat-eye glasses, and she would wear her glasses on a chain. She would never put her arms in her sweater. Her sweater was just buttoned like a cape. So I mean, as a kid, I really believed she had some kind of superpowers because she could see when I was cutting up her all the way across the room. And we were in this same routine. We would come into her room and have to diagram sentences. Kids don't do that anymore, but you have to diagram sentences. You had to follow her rules. But I wasn't a rule follower. And in fact, 5th grade was a year that I stretched out and started breaking some rules. And I was there every day clapping erasers. That's when we used chalkboard. Clapping erasers and running dittos. I could smell a ditto ink right now. Running those dittos for her, right? I'm a child of the 70s, so all of these 70s, so all of these references hopefully make sense to you. But one thing that she asked me one day was, why are you here? I mean, we're going through this dance every day. You clap erasers, I must not talk, I must not disrupt, you know, the sentences you had to write afterwards. Why are you here? And I never had an adult just like engage me like that as a child. And every day she would unpack a little more about me. And she was the first adult outside of my home that I told my secret to. My secret was that my dad was incarcerated. My dad had a drug addiction and was incarcerated. And then every day when I would walk to school, I would walk past this penitentiary. And they actually tore it down last year, but it's on Greenmount Avenue and Preston Street, which is 1 block over from those row homes. So I would have to walk past this building every day, knowing my dad was there, a lot of fear and shame. And this teacher got that secret and figured out, look, you're acting out. You're acting out for some kind of reason. And she started to like really believe in me and change my behavior in school because I was really going down the wrong pathway. And so that shame and fear started to turn to hope just with that investment in me. And I said, if an educator can do that, you know, that's something I want to do. And later on, I moved up. She got me into, from all of these challenges, my brother passed away. My parents were divorced. My dad went to prison. We had to move into my grandmother's house, which, as you hear, was crowded, but a house full of love. Didn't know I was poor, but there were symptoms, right, that were challenges. But through that, Miss Miller showed me some opportunities and got me into a local prestigious high school, something like Hutchinson, Institute of Notre Dame. convinced my mom to do a placement test and changed my life again. And every year I would go back to see her in her 5th grade class until she retired. But what she inspired me to do is to go into education. And this is my first year teaching, and the building here is the school that I attended in my community. And I went back and taught at that school. The greatest thing ever. And I got for 1 year to teach with Miss Miller. It was her last year of her retirement. That was so special. But I found a little one just like me, Risa. Risa was every day in my class after school. Now, I didn't have erasers to class because I was the next generation. But I found myself asking her more and more about her home. What's going on at home? What is going on to have you act out? And I found out that Risa was a foster child that had been in 5 different foster homes. There was a lot of trust issues with adults. And we grew to have a wonderful relationship. I actually got her to learn how to read and to really get a passion for science. I would buy her science books. But the great thing about Risa was she went on to the military and became a nurse. And she teaches others, so she passed that on. But that was about someone invested in me, and I felt like I had to give back. And that moving into the school was that important, sidebar. So I get to Memphis, and why Memphis? I was in a program that was just for 2 years to stay here. 2 years has turned into 15 years. Why Memphis was that there were just the conditions in smaller neighborhoods and communities to make a difference. First, people here really invested in the betterment of lives from all walks of life. That's Memphis. And sometimes you don't see that in a bigger city in the East Coast. But every neighborhood, you have just great people wanting a better life. There was so much hope and optimism that I had to stay here, right? And I had to take this experience from Miss Miller and say, how can we replicate this? How can we get a whole school of Miss Millers and a whole community of Miss Millers, right? And so in 2008, we put in a charter application. Gestalt Community Schools, a K-12 charter school. It is a public school. We are getting federal and state funding, but we have an opportunity to do something different from your traditional public schools and to try different types of curriculum and programming to reach the students. So, and we got approval in 2008, we wrote this, but what happened that spring was another challenge. In Hickory Hill, if you all recall, a tornado set down. And being this little East Coast girl, I never experienced a tornado. We had an office in the Hickory Ridge Mall where the Payless shoe store was. That's our office, gone. Hickory Hill, we were leaving. This happened during rush hour, if you all recall how that tornado just hit. And while we literally went through a tornado, there was a figuratively tornado that we were going through as a community. Because that year was the year of the recession. And the neighborhood was changing over the last 10 years. A lot of homeowners were moving out of the Hickory Hill area. Hickory Hill across the state in that 38115 zip code had the highest rate of home foreclosure. As you know, companies were going into bankruptcy, but when you look at Hickory Hill, the mall with the carousel, all of that was just a really big feature and landmark of that community. Circuit City, Barnes and Nobles, they were moving out of the community along with many long-term residents. And it was starting to leave an empty shell in the community. More and more businesses were moving east. Further down, Winchester was growing, going towards South Wind. Further east, Port Over and Collierville, but Hickory Hill was losing a lot of the great assets. And so we decided that summer, we took that challenge of everything, the recession that was happening. what was happening in the community to launch our school. And we opened our first school in 2008 through that opportunity to only 125 scholars. And it is a school and still is focused on business and entrepreneurship, community service. And the goal was to leave your community better than you found it. And how do you start that? You invest in youth with that mindset that they have to leave their community better than they found it. And it starts with them as an individual. So we had 125 students and parents trusting us because what is charter? They didn't know. It felt strange. Kids wore different uniforms. Folks were like, do you have to pay to go here? So all of that. Over 50% of our students when we came in were 2 to 3 grade levels below. 2 to 3 grade levels below. Over 80% of our families were classified as economically disadvantaged, with about 50% of them at the poverty line. So we had challenges, but we saw it also as an opportunity that in spite of this, what are the conditions, that initial question that I asked you. And so I'm gonna just click through a little bit, but we're at over 2,000 students. And people will often ask me as an African-American female, where did you get the name Gestalt? That's a good old German name. Where did you get it? Well, Gestalt, and if you know the Gestalt psychology, it really is this whole thing of an organized whole is perceived as more than the sum of its parts. And the sum of its parts is school and community. And what we know is anything that happens in the neighborhood and the community impacts the school. And anything that happens in the school impacts the community. And we can't live in silos. We have to be in partnership, that organized whole. And that's why we are Gestalt Community Schools. A community school that cares about what happens in the home and the community, opens our schools up to those communities. So 125 scholars, 13 years later is now over 2,000. And our goal is always, you can stop right here. Our goal is always to have students college ready, career ready, and community ready. Any of those pathways that you want to empower and to get back to your community. And at the core is really building a better community. Schools are at the center of a larger community. When schools are healthy, the community is healthy. When schools move out or close down, that's the sign of an eroding community, right? And so we want to be in the center of building better community and community revitalization, really elevating all of those assets within the community. They're great people. There's the unofficial mayor of Hickory Hill, Helen Collins. You go to her when you have any problems, she gets it to the mayor and she gets it done. So when you forge that type of community, then you're building a better community. The thing that we're always committed to and we're unapologetic about, that I think is one of those conditions to resiliency, is that when parents bring and trust their children to us, we make sure they're known, loved, and educated. We're unapologetic. You know, folks want you to just look at the education, but we know every child, we know their triggers, we know what inspires them, we know what's going on at home. We meet with parents constantly. And this love is not underrated. You know, when people are hired, I'm sometimes trying to talk them out of the job because I'm so passionate about, you have to love what you do, but love the people that you serve. And so with the challenge of 83% of our families, this was last year, 83% economically disadvantaged. Living paycheck to paycheck, and then with the pandemic, just really losing a lot of hope and opportunity and struggling through grief, but 100% of hope. How are we getting people so optimistic? And it's something about this community and the ability to see each person in that community. And so from that challenge, as we moved through, we faced a lot of challenges and we turned them to opportunities. So the school started in 2008. By 2011, the state of Tennessee gave us the SCORE award, not gave us, we earned it. Remember, 50% of our kids were coming to us below reading level. By 2011, we were the top middle school in the state, and we won an award for it. And they came to see what we were doing that was different. And what they said was, oh, you are a community school. You have community members in volunteering, teaching students how to read. You are building and a part of revitalization, which you'll see in a minute. But we were very proud of the first school in Memphis to win this award. And it inspired us to continue to have the opportunity to replicate. From there, we opened our high school, and we kept opening schools each year because there was a need. And 2015, our first graduating class graduated. And from 2015 on, we've had 100% graduation rate. And most of the students are with us from 6th grade to 12th, but some jump in and join us 10th grade or 9th grade. And we're proud to have now alumni. They've graduated from college and they're coming back to work at the school. So we have 3 alumni now that are teachers at our school, a math teacher, ESL teacher, a special educator, and we're just so proud. And what they say is, I have to give back. That's in our DNA. And those were the conditions we wanted to start with our mission, make you college ready, career ready, and community ready. But there were still challenges because getting them to college wasn't enough. It's something about sustaining them for a successful life. Not every child wants the pathway to college. Some are in the military, some are going into terrific trade, but how do we reinforce them so that when they face challenges in life, they have something to lean on that's internal, right? That they can lean on. That was our next challenge. So we have to look at school a little differently. And we started pressing into some larger community revitalization. So at the top is Marina Cove. Anyone remember Marina Cove's apartments in Hickory Hill? Well, I understand in its heyday in the 70s and 80s, that's where folks wanted to live. It's 280 apartments. They had beautiful canals. It was where middle income folks had their starter homes, starter places. But later in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was constantly being sold and bought. So the property owners lived in Florida, and it became a blighted apartment complex of 280 empty units with trash everywhere at Hickory Hill. It was an eyesore. We were able to partner with New Direction Christian Church, Power Center Community Development, and the city of Memphis, as well as Habitat for the Humanity, to buy the 24 acres of land for only $250,000, because the out-of-state landlords had owed taxes. And we got an actual $1 million from the city of Memphis to clear this land. It actually cost $1.2 million to level all of these apartment complexes, to clear all of the waste. And we built a school here, our middle school, which were in portables on a parking lot of the church. The 125 kids were on a parking lot of the church in portables, to a school that could fit 460 students. And from that partnership, Habitat for the Humanity built on this same property first-time homes for our families. They became first-time homeowners. So 10 homes were built. They're actually going to be building more. And what we realized was that it mattered where kids go to school, where they play, where they live. And so we're trying to, in the center of every community, build quality schools where there's revitalization, where there's a safe environment for kids. And we did the same thing across the street at Mendenhall Mall. Mendenhall Mall had Kroger shopping, Kroger grocery store, Southeast Community College. There were a bustling, open shopping center, and all of those places moved. What was left was Christ Community Health Services, which is a great partner of ours, and they were about to move out, and Regions Bank. We worked to have a funder help us to rent out a space and then eventually bought a space and started to build community in that space. So we had a healthcare partner, a mental health partner in Christ community. Regents Bank decided to stay when they saw that we were moving an elementary and a middle school in this parking lot that was empty. Now it's a bustling parking lot with our high school and our elementary school that was opened in 2019.
Is this real far south on Mendenhall? Because Mendenhall's in my neighborhood.
All the way, Mendenhall and Winchester is at the intersection of Mendenhall and Winchester.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so from that, you know, challenges to opportunities. And then spring of 2020, we all lived through this in March, students going to spring break, and we never came back to school afterward because of Corona. But we had staff that were still calling kids every day, a well child visit. How are you doing? Talking to parents, either through Zoom or through the phone. It was daily contact. Even some staff massing up for a home visit to deliver food to our families. It just pushed us to take all of these challenges to say, if we're truly the community of known, loved, and educated, then we gotta operate in double time. And we couldn't do this alone. We had a lot of local nonprofit organizations helping us during this, and some great, great educators that, with all of this new technology, were pivoting at their home and their kitchen table with their children, educating our children. It was remarkable of the power of the community during this time. But there was still a lot of fear and anxiety. I want you to take a minute to read this. This was in the New York. Yeah, that was sobering. I remember reading that one morning, reading my online subscription of the New York Times and thinking, wow, we're in the midst of this pandemic, but we don't know the scars for generations to come. The article was entitled The Corona Generation. But what I knew on the ground was I had staff members that were grieving families that were lost. I had students who are, again, much like my home in East Baltimore, multi-generation families living in a home. That's pretty normal for our families. Many different generations, both for our Latinx families and our African American families. And they were losing grandma, grandpa, an aunt or uncle throughout this. A lot of loss and grief. But then what does this mean in the scars that they bring? And then how can we take this challenge and turn it to opportunity and hope? Just as a question that we're fighting. So we re-entered, and probably about only 40% of our students came back face to face. You know, there was still anxiety, there was still fear and grief. There still is today. We start school on August 9th. We still have to continue to provide a safe environment and continue to, through all of the politics, structure what is the safest way for reentry. And it is a challenging, difficult situation. But we had about 40% go in person, masked up, 6 feet apart. We had contact tracing. We do testing each week. But still 60% were at home because of that fear, that anxiety. It was real and genuine. And so with that challenge, it started to have us reshape what school looks like. Do you need all the brick and mortar to learn? Are there other ways to learn? And so we're pushing in hard at different pathways to learn. I will tell you that distance learning, remote learning works probably for a small percentage of students, but there are students that thrive in that space. But our students need the human social environment and touch. We gotta be in school. So we were promoting come in, and we're still promoting it. And so even in that year, the class of 2021 had an in-person graduation. The class of 2020 did not. It was the first graduation that was virtual. But this class of 2021, we had our first Latina valedictorian, which was great. Both female valedictorian and salutatorian, but their stories were so much about this resiliency, this human resiliency. Starting with Rachel. Rachel's story, she has a speech impediment and she has a immune deficiency syndrome. And she would be afraid to speak publicly because of her stutter, and then having so many days sick and in and out of Lavana as a child, that her mom would say, I just don't know, the school environment is the right environment for her. And she talks about her first day in 6th grade, how she felt so welcoming, even with her stutter, that her teacher called on her constantly to speak and say, you are born to speak. We understand you have a stutter, but you have to practice. She never had that before. And then social. Social is, Figueroa is a bubbly student, but she talks about her neighborhood and going through ICE and immigration and being fearful to even come to school or work was her pathway. But she convinced a cousin of hers to come to our school. He was in the neighborhood high school. And she said, you'll be teased, but not as much as at our school. Like, we still tease, they're teenagers, but not as much. And her cousin, during the graduation, he was the one to introduce her. And he talked about his journey of his sexual identity and not being welcome as a transgender teen. And then the school welcomed him, and then his cousin convinced him to come. So we started to build this environment of inclusion, acceptance, and appreciation that was just tremendous. And they say the youth will be the ones to take us there. It is so true. They're taking the adults there. And then all throughout this racial unrest and trauma, look, the pandemic just unpacked and put on the surface what was already there for us. Because even before this pandemic, our high school students that would have driver's ed also had the conversation we call the talk in high school, that if a police officer stops you, don't make any sudden moves, put your hands on the wheel. I mean, you have to really go through a lot of discussions to get our Black and brown students ready for something that may seem like a normal traffic stop, right? In what we're hearing in the news and what we're experiencing in our community. Not to plant fear, but to be proactive. No sudden moves, hands on the wheel. I mean, we're having those kind of discussions when we should be talking about getting your driver's license. But this unrest permeated to trauma in the home. And we had to really focus on who the students are and what they're bringing to the table, both fear, anxiety, as well as implanting optimism. We are forever changed. Can't do this the same way. School is going to look different. Our teachers already know it. How do we do even more to have, and Mark is working with us at the school on a whole family approach. Like, how do we educate the child and the family? So we have these sessions on wellness and mental health that parents engage in with their children. We have to do school differently. We can't stay into our school and say from 8 to 3, it's school is closed. In fact, our buildings are open to our families even after that time. So I wanted to get back to the question, what are the conditions for human resiliency? What did you hear on the conditions for that? And if you have any questions as well.
Either individual level or community level at one.
Either.
Individually, you've got to know that you're loved, that you're worthy.
Yeah. So those that are home, your name?
Chuck.
Chuck said you gotta know that you're loved and you belong. That's like the basic, what Maslow essentials, right? That's human condition. People need to know they're loved and that they belong. I love that on the individual level. That's true.
How do your families and children feel about vaccination? Are they open to it, and do you offer any opportunity for it?
Yeah, we're promoting it. As a matter of fact, Tuesday, we launched a campaign called Unite, where we're promoting vaccination from anyone 12 years old or older. We did an initial survey at the end of the school year, and it was very low, the vaccination rates for families. Now, our staff members, our vaccination rate is higher. It was at the end of the school year close to 75%, and we believe it's going to be higher. But yes, it's still some fear and anxiety there. But we're partnering with Christ Community Health Services to get those vaccinations. The first time it was just hard to navigate the website to get it scheduled. So we had parent specialists helping to get it scheduled. But now it's just the fear and the myths that we're fighting. But we are promoting it. But we also know it's a personal choice. But we're saying your individual contribution to the community is to mask up, which we're going to be wearing masks when we come back, and to get vaccinated if you're eligible and are able to.
Well, I ran into a lady at Kroger the other day who had a black woman who had a T-shirt on, but I have one of which is provided by Memphis, which said, "I got my COVID shot," and I got one of those too. And I thought, I need to wear mine when I go out. And like she is.
Wear it, start the movement.
Right.
It's fear. I think we're getting a little more parents. I talked to a parent the other day that said, "Miss Lewis, I got my first shot last week." I said, "Yeah, you got your first shot." And she's like, "Now I don't know about my babies." Her babies are high school.
Oh.
I was like, "Well, they're old enough to get their shots." She said, "But I don't know about my babies yet." She has a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old. I was like, "Yeah, they're eligible to get their shots." And I said, "We want you around for the long run. We don't know if you're going to get a mild version of COVID or something that will make you hospitalized, right?" And she said, "Yeah, okay, I'm gonna sign them up." And I literally got her on the phone to sign up at Christ Community. She went up there with the kids as well. So she said, "Okay, we're waiting for shot 2. We'll get shot 2 before school starts." I said, "Yay, now can I get more?" It's gonna have to be a movement, and it's a no judgment zone, because families tell us everything from there's poison in the shot to you can't trust it, to COVID is a hoax. And so I can't judge those stories, but I can only continue to give them the facts and hopefully to inspire them to want to do it, not only for themselves, that individual belonging, but also for the community. That's the hard part, to be quite honest. Yes, sir.
I'm Jonathan, and I know for community resiliency, especially a school community, you need good faculty. And I know that I'm also a teacher.
Oh.
Two of the biggest challenges for any school is recruitment and then retention of faculty.
Yeah.
So could you please speak to that and how, now that you've got such a large school population, how are you dealing with those issues?
Yeah, we're welcoming, we have about 225 staff, and we're welcoming this year 40 new teachers. Now, that retention rate across our network is about 90%.
That's fantastic.
And that's a composite of all 5 schools, and there are different rates at each school. I can't rattle them off, but this year has been the highest retention rate across the network. And while we have new teachers going on, it's because of expansion. Our Southeast school is adding a grade, or we're adding more positions. But it is hard to retain and recruit teachers. Across the nation, either there are not enough teachers going into the field, and then those that are going in are not staying long enough. So just like Ms. Miller, who retired after 35 years, we get smaller and smaller populations of folks that are like Ms. Miller. The work is hard, it's grueling. And so there's a struggle with work-life balance. But what we try to do is recognize the human side of our educators. So just like you saw known, loved, and educated, we have something for teachers, and it's called known, valued, and accountable. They need to be known, they need to belong. You know, knowing everything from you lost someone in your family from COVID, which we've had many teachers, to the struggle of even them as new faculty with student loans living paycheck to paycheck, to the grueling side that sometimes as a principal, you'll come into a classroom and it's just not a good lesson. But that's not indicative of the teacher every day. So you have to have a balance with human beings. And so what teachers like in our network is the recognition of them as human beings. We're not widgets and sprockets trying to teach a lesson, but there's human to human interaction. And not everyone is going to have a great day, but they're going to have more great days than bad days because we're so connected. So we're honored and actually blessed to have these returning staff. As a matter of fact, we had all new staff last week. On Monday, we have all the returning staff. And I tell everyone that I'm like a kid the first day of school. I get the butterflies. I gotta get my school outfit together for the first day of school. I got my special pencil and notebook. I actually still buy stationery, right? I'm just a forever type of school person. But that excitement is just hope for the future. Thank you for asking that question.
You don't have to have the resources behind you. To be, you can be as psychologically resilient as you ever want to be, but if you don't have the resources, the redundancy behind you to actualize it, I'm sorry, kids.
Yeah, we make some tough decisions. So we're constantly, we as a public school get public dollars, about $9,000 per kid. The local district school gets about 10,000, a little bit more than us. But it's still not enough a year per kid to educate them, to pay the teachers, to get the social workers, to get psychologists, to have meals to go home. So I do a lot of fundraising. I partner with a lot of, Memphis is just a giving city. People want to just give to a cause where they know that it's impacting people. And I find myself just constantly asking for help and knowing one of our core values is humility. And for us, humility is, this work is too big to do it alone. And this work is too big to do it alone. I mean, we can instill all of the hope and optimism, but if you're not resource rich, you won't be able to actualize it. And so for us, we are building so that it's sustaining. We get to try a little bit more mental health because of some of the federal and state funding that's coming through ESSER. You may have heard about on the news, extra funding for mental health and wellness. For the first time, every school will have a social worker and a full-time nurse. That's what every school should have had, right? You should have a full, you didn't have it. You didn't have the budget in the public school to do that. And so we made decisions like to get better technology, to have the technology go home with the child, a home that doesn't have internet to make sure they have internet. So we're building infrastructure, but we have to have funding to sustain that infrastructure because all of that hope and optimism and our village mentality of known, loved, and educated will be on a shallow foundation because it takes infrastructure to make it happen. Thank you for that. That's the reality, right?
Yeah.
That's the reality.
So are you considered a public school, a private school, or a charter school? What is your designation?
We're a charter school.
Charter school.
So we fall under Shelby County Schools as a charter school. Our charter was approved by the state, so we're a public charter. There are different types of charter, but in Tennessee has only public charter schools. So they're public schools that can design their own curriculum and their own approach to education outside of the local district schools. So our hiring practices are a little different, our curriculum is different, our uniforms are different. But we still have to take the state assessment at the end, with 10 ready. We still have all of those accountabilities with special ed students as well, in our population. Did you? No, question?
No, I was just thinking, so.
So you were one school.
So we started with one, we have five, two elementary, 2 middle, and 1 high school over the last 13 years.
And they're different premises, so they're all together.
3 are in Hickory Hill, and then our 2 newer schools are further southeast, going towards Southwind area. But still in the same community, they're about 10 miles apart.
Going to resources, how does your pay scale compare to Shelby County schools?
I think Shelby County adjusted their pay scale, but we started $2,000 more than Shelby County schools. So our teachers made more, but I think we're maybe on par now, but I haven't followed that enough. So our teachers with a bachelor's degree start out at about $47,000 starting. And I think our neighborhood schools were at 45 or 44,000.
And from whence do you recruit your teachers?
Everywhere. But the biggest
Is your focus on young people coming out of school?
we have to, because we don't have enough. It's so hard, it's so hard. We want someone that has had a couple of years under their belt because the work is hard, but that's a luxury. So we have a mixture, and I would say in our network, probably 50% are new to teaching and about 50% aren't. But it's important, that retention rate question, because at each year, if you stay beyond your first, your second, and third year, you get better. You can tell as an educator, my first year, I should be paying the students for just putting up with me, right? In the first year. But by year 10, I just was in my groove. So we want teachers to be able to stay and support them. But there's not enough. There is a teacher shortage throughout the nation that is at a critical juncture right
Yeah,
now.
most people think of new teachers as young people with degrees, and I'm just, with life expectancies getting, extended.
Yeah,
People are, if you retire at 65, you've still got 10.
come on, that's a pathway, come on. And as a matter of fact, if you're degreed, we'll work with you to get your certification. The policy that I want the state of Tennessee to waiver is for folks that have worked in their field that want to come back and give back and teach. A great journalist or writer, an engineer, a scientist that wants to come back and teach chemistry and mathematics. Yes. And you're a mature adult. Yes, we want you here. But in the state of Tennessee, there's the certification part. And so we try to work with folks that are starting their next career to come on in. And you may start out as a volunteer. I'm thinking of one person in particular who worked as a musician and teaches music in one of our schools, and then went on, she now teaches kindergarten, but she started as a music teacher, and we got her certified, and now she's one of our best kindergarten teachers. And this was her second career. She was a musician who said, oh, I got this teacher thing that I want to do. My kids are off in college. I want to go back to work. My kids are out of the nest. And she came back and was our music teacher for a year. That's what she thought. And then the little people just stole her heart. And she's been a kindergarten teacher with us for about 4 years. And second generation career aspiration. So how do we reach more folks like that? No, that's a question. Like, how do you reach? How do you make that known? Because that could help with the teacher shortage that we're dealing with.
How, out of curiosity, are the Memphis Teachers Residency programs?
I love that program.
Still going strong, and then also Teach for America, are those good resources?
Yeah, we have some. We probably have very small Teach for America. We started early on with Memphis Teacher Residency, so I love the work that they do. But they are now focused on a particular community, and it's not Hickory Hill, so we're not eligible for Memphis teacher residency. I think Orange Mound and another area, maybe Fraser, are their designated areas. But those programs allow you to shadow an expert teacher as a resident for 2 years. They pay for you to get your master's degree and certification. In turn for you coming back and serving as a teacher. And I think that's an ideal, like that's where funding should go, like getting people trained under really great teachers that come back to have their own class, to replenish when that retention rate isn't as high as where we want it to be. We love those programs, especially MTR. I hope they expand. But I understand their impact. They want to focus on one community and just deeply penetrate and not just cover a community, but deeply impact the community. But we need someone to do that for Hickory Hill. You hear a lot about Orange Mound and Fraser communities, but Hickory Hill is one of those communities that if you start now, it won't get in a place where it is an underserved, under-resourced community. There's still a lot of hope, there's still infrastructure, there's still desire for the community to make this happen. We just need people to invest time, money, and their expertise.
What, in terms of the charter school community, are there still a lot of these startups coming in, or is it stabilized? That's going to affect all of you in funding?
Yeah. So Memphis and then Nashville, a second, has the most charter schools. Memphis has probably close to about 60 or so charter schools. With the first charter school opening in 2005 here. So it's been early on into the charter school movement. But still it doesn't capture, I think it captures maybe about 50,000 students. So it's still a very small impact compared to over 100,000 or so that the traditional school covers. But population has been moving, our population has been shifting. So, Nashville are seeing a lot of new families, a lot of people moving there over the past 10 years and growing. So there's more children to serve. So there is a population shift that we're all dealing with in serving. There are less charter schools being approved by Shelby County schools. So those numbers have gone down each year, partly due to a quality control issue, which we want the best of the best here. And the other is, can every neighborhood support a traditional school and a charter school? Are there enough students? We believe there are enough students to go around. And we also believe that families should have a choice. That your school and quality of school shouldn't be just on the zip code that you live in. That within that zip code, you should have some choices to go to what elementary school that you think is best for your child. So part of our work is providing families choices. I can get passionate. And I'm a public school person. I always put public in front of charter because some people have this conception that it is not public, but it is. And I've always asked the question when they see pictures of our students or when they come to our school, oh, a beautiful campus, the uniform, blah, blah, blah. How much is the tuition? And I'm like, it's a public school. And then I get this look, I'm like, yes, and the uniforms, we pay for those. It's like school supply. We provide the uniforms to the students. We don't want anything to make them feel like they don't belong. And sometimes it's the tennis shoes you wear, the uniform that you wear, that whether I'm going to come to school today. In fact, our elementary schools have washers and dryers where parent volunteers come in and wash uniforms and give them back to the kids. Because that, we found out, was a reason why they weren't coming to school.
Well, that seems to be one of the reasons why you're becoming successful, is you're getting parents to buy in. We sent our 2 boys to Memphis public schools, and the schools that succeeded in, to me, had the highest percentage of parental involvement. boys went to Iowa Elementary. And there were parents involved in every classroom and every facet.
That's it.
And we couldn't have asked for a better education for our boys.
That's it. That's it. So the tricky part is how to get, so we have working parents that may not be able to take off. And I learned that really during the pandemic, that we have not only students, high school students that were first line employees, but parents that were working double shifts at Kroger. I would go into Kroger and see a high school senior. I'm like, you go all online. It's like, I gotta work. I'm gonna lose my job. I gotta pay bills. But in spite of all of that, we found different ways to get parents engaged. So if you're not up in this classroom volunteering, you're doing a community service project on the evening. You're donating supplies that you have in your house. You're donating old uniforms. They are involved. And parents thank us for that. That it's not just sitting in a PTA meeting and hearing all the school talk, that we're inviting them in, and it's not the stigma of going to the principal's office. Many of our families have been disenfranchised. When they go to the principal's office, they feel even more isolated, or can't engage in the education speak conversation. So we do this thing called Parent Academy, where it's just classes that they go to, they pick and choose, but it starts with parent orientation. And we ask them to volunteer at least 5 hours, just 5 hours to start, to your child's school. Like, if you're gonna commit, we're gonna commit to you, give us just 5 hours. So you are right, that is, I think, one of the part of the ecosystem that we built is the strong parental involvement. Could not do it without our parents, could not.
All right, good, at that time.
So again, I want to thank everybody here and online for participating today. We really appreciate you. Yetta Lowes coming and speaking today. And I do know next week we have, her name is Dr. Simone Lerme, and she will actually be talking to us about the food culture on Summer Avenue. So I'm really excited about
Yay!
that. So
We have to come back to that.
So thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. And everybody have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you all, thank you for having me.
Thank you for your very articulate presentation.
Oh, it's all I adore you. I enjoyed being with you and everyone at home today. Forgot was there.
I know, it's easy for them.
Thank you.
You're there.
You've been well.
Yeah, I'm still here.